Welcome to the Evolution of Mom podcast. We are your hosts, Amy and Sharice, and we hope you enjoyed our last episode with the Mindset Moms on teamwork makes the dream work. Today, we have our special guest with us, Dawn, who is with Simply Core Fit, who's a kinesiologist and a core specialist. So, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I love this.
Yeah, we're pretty excited because we're going to start to dive into peeing and sneezing and exercise and some of the embarrassing things that go along with women that kind of keep us from doing some of the things that we really enjoy doing.
And the things that we don't talk about enough, I feel like, but that are so common, right? So common between women. That's something that's a big staple for Sharice and I, is to make sure we're talking about these common things, making them normal, making sure that women know that just because it's common doesn't mean it has to be that way. We're really swinging in that direction as much as we can for women. So I'm really excited that you're here because this is exactly what you do for women.
You might need to get a little closer to the mic.
Like this. All right.
So tell us a little bit about how you got to do what you are doing.
What I do, yeah. So I'm a kinesiologist. I've been in this business for about 25 years. And one of the main things that I kind of ran into is, you're helping people, but there was always pain. So I just felt like I'm always working around pain. And pain's so debilitating. It's such an inhibitor. It just stops you from doing what you really want to do. So that was a big one. And looking at the pelvis and being like, wow, you clean this up and all kinds of other things clean up. So I got more and more into that. I'm very lucky in who I was surrounded by, and I'm married to a therapist who worked for Cirque du Soleil. So kind of in that zone anyway. But yeah, I just found, so I've sort of leaned more and more and more, and then realizing, 10 years ago, I thought, oh, the word core will go away. And it really didn't. And I realized more than ever, we actually need to be talking about what real core is, because we tend to be like, ooh, abs and back. I do core, which is kind of true, but there's an outer core and an inner core. And that outer core is really your abdominals that you see. So that's what we focus on, because that's what you can see. But they should be your prime movers. They should, flex you, extend, side bend, move you, not stabilize you. So when you're getting into like stabilizing with those outer core muscles, it actually works against you. So trying to educate people of like, here's your true core. There's actually a deep core beneath that. There's a group of muscles that sort of form a cylinder. And if that cylinder is perfectly pressurized, you have a functional core. And when it's not, you don't. And the further, the more imbalance there is, the greater the compensation. So then you go for a run, or you start weightlifting, or you do whatever you do, or you pick up kids all day, or whatever the thing is, you know what I mean? Or you load groceries, or you're lean over a car seat. Those compensations become bigger and bigger, and then you have more pain. And then with more pain, there's more, right? It's a bad cycle. So looking at that cycle. So what I do is go in and repattern. So I look at, wow, this isn't functioning. This isn't moving well. This isn't stabilizing well. Those are the two main things I'm looking for. And we clean that up. So it's, we were talking about it earlier, like running the bases, and you're at second base and you're like, Dawn, I'll meet you there. And I'm like, nope, we're going to go back to home, and we're going to go to first and then second. And your body's going to be like, nope, just going to go to third, and I'll meet you at second. And so repatterning, getting certain things to stop doing what they're doing, and then clean it up and take a new route. Because as soon as you clean that up, the results are like crazy. So, and watching people go from like, this just is how it is. I have a lot of pain. My life, this is my life, or it is what it is. And turning around and being like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to, like, I'm doing these new activities, or I took this up, or I started running, or I'm skateboarding, or whatever it is you decide to take up, or just living life not in pain it's like mind blowing. So I love what I do. And like you said, no one's talking about it. So I'm like, let's talk about it.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Right. And I'm like, I know one thing that we've discussed, and I love discussing this because, I've never discussed it before, but I think it's an important thing to discuss is like the peeing situation when we're either working out or like jumping on trampolines or,
Mine's the sneeze. Sneezing or laughing too hard.
Yeah, right? Like those are things that we've just accepted as common. As normal as like being a mom of two kids. It was like, oh, well, this is just my life now, right? Yeah. But discussing with you that like it actually shouldn't be that way. And I know it's quite a shameful thing. And I mean, nobody likes it, but we all hide it, which is like the worst thing, is that nobody's even talking about it.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be something of like, you know, sharing your peace story daily on the internet of like, here's my Instagram of the day, like this happened.
Didn't somebody get famous for that?
Oh, I bet you there's someone out there.
That wouldn't surprise me.
There is a girl that got famous like because she like peed while she worked out.
Oh yes, yes.
Kevin just
That's
told us about that.
That's right. Thank you,
Yeah.
Kevin.
Yeah, it like legit, like that's how it happened, is like she peed while she was exercising and then ended up like being a YouTube sensation because people aren't talking about it, but it is such a common thing.
It's a common thing, and what we're really not talking about, so even when we do talk about it, we're like, ha ha ha, over a glass of wine, like peed myself when I did this, you know, like you said, jumped on the trampoline or whatever. But we're also not talking about the fact that it doesn't have to be that way. So there are ways of cleaning that up. And I, again and again and again, I have people come to me and they're like, nah, half the time they don't even tell me this is an issue. So they'll skip over that and be like, oh, my neck hurts, or, you know, there's other issues because of that shame. So I'm glad you touched on the shame, is that we don't want to talk about it, or we just think it is what it is. But they're shocked when they're like, oh, hey, yeah, I know, actually, I haven't peed myself in, well, forever, or I barely, you know what I mean? Because it becomes kind of who you are, and you start living your life around it. Like, can I sneeze, or if I'm out in public, where can I go? Do I need to be looking for a bathroom? And that, knowing those stories, one of the first people I worked with, and I work a lot online, which is crazy. I know we've come to this place, but I've been online for about 5 years. And when I started, one of the very first people was referred to me, and she'd seen everybody. She'd seen like pelvic floor specialists, she'd seen physios, she'd seen everybody. And she was like, I'm still having this issue. My oldest one's 4. Like, when is this going to stop? And I assessed her online, looked at her, and her pelvis was like on sideways. I mean, I can see this over the internet, which blows my mind, of like, well, did anyone else look at your pelvis? And she said no, which blew my mind as well, but that's another story. But anyway, so looking at that, and she said, you know, she called me 3 weeks later and said, by the way, this has been life-changing. My husband doesn't have to pull the car over every 20 minutes for me to find a bathroom. And I thought, well, that just changed her life. Like going through these days where you have to know where a bathroom is, or where you're conscious of who you're out with, or what you're doing, or what sports you do, or that's a quality of life. So to give women and men, because men have pelvic floors, so this is everyone's like talking to their husband now, like, hey, Bill. Yeah, like really talking about that and change, right? Like it's an empowerment when you start having control, because when that controls you, it's like when pain controls you, that changes everything. So when you can control your pain, or when you can control that part of your body that's not in control, it's like having like a superhero cape. It is so mind-blowingly different. And you look at these women, like women in business, powerful women, or just awesome moms or whatever, and they're being taken down by their pelvic floor, all because, oh, well, you had kids, so of course it doesn't work, which it's a myth. Like, it shouldn't be like that. And why are we not talking to younger girls, younger women? Like, hey, by the way, we're all like, oh, hey, by the way, after you have kids, you're going to need a pelvic floor specialist. Like, why wouldn't we like, oh, hey, by the way, if you're even thinking of having kids or not, and just you're going to get older, things are going to get less elasticity in them. You know, why don't you do a few of these things? Like, just learn how to breathe properly. There's some really simple techniques. There's some simple standing postures. There's some really simple stuff. And I talk about all this on my Instagram and Facebook, because I think it's really important to just cover that. Like, man, if you just change the way you stand today, it can make a huge difference. You'll never know, because 20 years down the road, you won't have the issues you might have had. But if I can give you that gift, it's so empowering. Yeah.
I find a lot of women are very reactive with things like that. They wait until it gets so bad that they need to go see someone. They need to go see a pelvic floor specialist. They need to go and take that more drastic measure. Surgery. Yes. I know tons of women who have had surgery for this. I know a lot of women who, I mean, have you ever been out dancing with a group of women and you just know they'll like stop and like then we're off, and then no, now I'm stopping. I had a dance party today in my living room that I had to stop mid dance party. Stop mid dance party. I know. Right in the great part of the song, really excited about it, had to stop mid dance party because it's like, well, mommy's bladder's a little too full. One sec. Right? So I mean, we talk about it in light, and a lot of women joke and jest about it, but it is something that is very common. Very common. And I think one of the stipulations is that it's because you've had children. Or one of the stigmas, maybe, is what I'm looking for. But I don't think that's exactly the case. You can have this issue without having children. It can be from a huge variety of things.
Yep. And one of the things, so I work with a lot of car accidents, a lot of active rehab after that. And I often will sort of bring this up of like any pelvic, and it, they're coming in to see me because they have a neck problem. So I'm sure they're like, why is she asking me about my downstairs? But it's really, really key, because often after traumas or after an accident, even though it was a hit higher in the body, it's thrown something off. So you will often see an increase in pelvic floor issues after a car accident, and that should be addressed. So yeah, let's address your neck and let's definitely clean that up. But that shouldn't be an aftermath that you didn't even realize. And it's often they didn't realize that was, oh yeah, that did come on more after that. Like you said, it doesn't have to be that you had children. I mean, most of us didn't learn about deep core training or like how to breathe when we were younger. So if you have, bracing techniques going on, it's not going to matter if you have kids or not. You're bracing. So that pressure's got to go somewhere, which typically is down on the pelvic floor, or all of a sudden there's a hernia, or, and then you're put under stress. So then all of a sudden you do have to lift something like, hey, can you carry these groceries in, or do this or do that? And it's a reactive thing. And your technique of stabilizing yourself is to brace. And that's where you get some issues and some pain, or something more drastic like a hernia. I mean, hernias don't just come on. Like there's something that led up to that. There's some kind of compensation, there's some kind of patterning. So knowing about that, and usually it can just be caught by knowing about it, right? The answer is just awareness in so many things. So
and I think it's actually one of those areas, like when you speak of awareness, it is one of those areas that we're not fully aware of. Like we actually disconnect from. And doing something like this is actually really good to bring body awareness back to that, like that full connection, right? Most women, I think we have this negative association with like our female parts. Because of
it's sexual, right? Like it's as long as it's
like
that, and it's always
inconvenient because it's like
covered,
monthly,
right? Like when's that not covered? So it's amazing how you think about, and this goes right back to like, what do you work when you go to the gym? Well, legs if they're uncovered, or arms, right? Like it's usually the parts that you see. Most people, they're going to skip something. They'll skip the midsection because that's nice and covered with a shirt. We're definitely not below the hips, right? Like so it's funny. It is such a private. Those are your privates, really. So it stays private, but it is something that we should definitely be talking about. Your glutes, your butt is the backside of your core. So like, hey, we could have another whole podcast on the butt.
Yes.
Butt podcast.
Yeah.
I love a good talk about a butt. I mean, I educate people all the time on their glutes because they're all like, even though their hips are always tight, they're always talking like, I'm like, your glutes are weak. And they're like, how can my glutes be weak? My hips are so tight. And I'm like,
yeah, how can it be weak and tight at the same time?
And it's like long, stretched out, tight, right? Like it's just a thing. And it's so interesting when we like, you break it all down, right? But we lack very much awareness about how we should be moving, how we should be standing. Just little things. Like there's just such little like tweaks that you can do to make things better, right?
And it's a space we're very reactive to because we're not hyper focused on it. So like periods and things like that, it's more of a negative association where it's, like you said, a burden, or which I could talk about forever. We also need to have a period podcast.
I think that's
many
coming in
podcasts.
May. I think
we should do one. Yes, May is for moms, so we want all of these like mom topics. They're like serving the parts of life that we really need to talk about. And this is one, you know what? I love when I hear you talk about how you're supporting women with their pelvic floor, how you make it convenient for them with their busy mom life schedule, because that's one of our biggest things. I got distracted earlier talking about my dance party, but I think that's where I was going with it, was that we're very reactive instead of proactive, especially when it comes to ourselves. Women are very not self-serving. What's the opposite? Right? We're always pouring outwards instead of looking inwards first, right? That's right. We're always serving. And so for us to go in and take that time for ourself and that part of our health, which is something we're definitely taught is just a normal part of our life. Oh, that's normal. You've had kids. You pee yourself. It's a thing, right? We're not going to go take that proactive step.
And you mentioned time, and that's like so good call. Like, I should work my core more, just like I should eat better and cook differently. And right? Who has the time to do? Yeah, like, oh my gosh, if I had all the time in the world. So yeah, I think looking at the core stuff, a lot of what I do is, and I started with these 7-minute programs. I was like, all right, 7 minutes, give me 7 minutes. And if you don't have 7 minutes, I always have the bare minimum, and I'm like, give me one. So I would way rather see someone give me 1 minute a day, give me one exercise, like 10 reps. It's crazy how much changes when you're consistent with that one thing. Because if we can clean up that one thing, and usually people are like, oh, I did that for a week, then I can totally do 2 or more. But when you're like, hey, I need you to do an hour, like, who the heck has an hour? Right? It's not realistic. Or to get down on the floor, like you said, like, do you know how many things are down on the floor? Like the dog, the babies, the whatever, I don't know. And then you're down there and you're like, oh,
I can see all the
floor,
dust.
I can see the dust. I can start
You
dusting,
can't
right?
focus.
You're like, oh, there's no focus on the floor.
Or you become a jungle gym.
You're a jungle gym. Like, there's so much going on. So as much as like it's a nice pipe dream to lie down on the floor and work your core, not everybody has half an hour of undisturbed time to lie down and work their core. So, do it at a stoplight. Like, just the breathing. Take a deep breath in. If you see yourself like rise up through your rear view mirror, you are inverted breathing. Like, that's a great time. Or if you do have some time at your desk, take a deep breath in. Again, your belly should be rising. Be aware of things like when you're driving. Am I gripping my bum? Like, am I gripping right now while I'm listening to this? Oh my gosh, I totally am. Do you grip when you stand? Do you grip when you sit? A lot of people with like heated seats in their cars just do a lot of driving, like driving the kids around or commuting. A lot of butt gripping, and butt gripping is a huge problem. And butt gripping you'll get digestive issues from that, a lot of pelvic issues. So you get pains that come out in like, oh, I have back pain. Flare your butt really is what it comes down to, is like, learn to let it go.
I think I'm a butt gripper. I'm thinking.
I'm like
I gotta learn to
like
let
a
it go.
lean on my right hip all the time, right? Like, I get in the car and I'm like always, because that's the side of the gas pedal and stuff, and like this leg even sits up on like my like pocket. It does sometimes.
It sneaks out there. But those are really like those postural things to be aware of like, oh my gosh, I do that every time I'm in the car. Well, how much time do you spend in the car in a day, right? Or looking at how you're standing. Are you standing with your knees locked? Because if you look around, a lot of people are standing with their knees locked, or standing on one hip, which is like every mother's like, of course you stand on one hip. You put the kid on the other hip and you use your right hand to like flip the frying pan or whatever you're doing, right? Or get in the door or whatever. And it tends to always be that right hand doing the fine motor skills, load the left side. And that's with or without kids. Like, if you had to put all your groceries in one hand and open the door with the other hand, it's typically your dominant hand. There's those ambidextrous people that are amazing, but the rest of us are like useless with the keys in our left hand if you're right-handed. So getting into those patterns and realizing, wow, like, your body has slings too. Like, we stabilize when you walk. Your right hand should be going forward as your left foot's going forward. Like, it's opposite. And very often we have these really strong slings on one side and the other side can't stabilize worth a darn. Well, now you go running for 20 minutes, feel like a rock star, come home and have massive hip pain 2 days later. Well, there was an imbalance that just got loaded and is a very big imbalance now. So and that can come from, like I said, just standing on that one hip as a habit all the time. That's thrown things off in your pelvis. So just being aware is a really good place to start. So if you're feeling like, I don't have time for 20-minute, 30-minute core stuff. Be aware of your standing posture is huge. Have weight on both feet. Don't stand on that one hip. Don't lock your knees. Great place to start. And breathe. And flare your bum.
Well, I don't know how many times that happens, though. Like, I mean, that happens to me all the time. I'm like, okay, Monday I'm going to start working out, right? And I'm like in there and I go really hard and whatever. And then I'm like, oh, but because I haven't worked those like little muscles that need to be worked. And it's like, truth is I mean, it's boring to work those little muscles. Like, you're just like, for me, I'm like, yeah, I want to go run a 5K and feel like I did something, or I want to go like lift heavy weight and feel like I did something. But it's the little muscles, those tiny little muscles, right? Like the first couple Pilates classes I went to, I was like, this shit is easy. I'm like, I don't know what everybody is talking about. And then like 3-4 like Pilates classes in, where you're actually starting to learn those proper movements and how to engage those tiny muscles, you're like, why is this so hard?
Right? But it can change everything, because you can plank, we like the plank. Like, who hasn't said the plank is like it, right? It's the thing to do. And if you're going to get some abs or whatever, plank. And I'm always like, planking is like the worst thing half the population can do, because if your pelvic floor doesn't work, if you don't breathe properly, you're just bracing through that plank, which is actually putting pressure on your pelvic floor. So now the plank, the very thing you're doing to make things better, is making things way worse for you. I talked about that lady that at the beginning that was having those issues and then got to the point where her husband didn't pull over. Like, that was one of the things. She was like, I do these videos online and I work out. She worked out a lot. And the first thing I did, I'm sure she wanted to shoot me, was like, we're going to pull all of that right now. I need you not to plank. Give me 1 week plank free, and we're going to do this. And like you said, just build up those little things. So it is really, you kind of have to trust me on the process, which is why I do videos like in vineyards and stuff, where you can like lie and breathe with me in a vineyard and lakeside. So at least there's something like try to like, it's the carrot, right? Like, come lie down beside a lake with me and take a deep breath in. But, yeah, like finding places in your day that it works for you is really important, because it shouldn't be like those people that hate running are like, I need to lose weight, I just have to run, but I hate it. Life's too short. So yeah, you need a better core, and it will help you and it will change your quality of life, but don't spend your time hating it, right? Find ways where we can put it in your life where it's functional to you. If it needs to be a standing core program, well then we learn how to, and that's part of it, right? Like, it's better, sure, to lie down, but lie down at night and take 10 deep breaths in and let your belly rise and your rib cage expand, and it's not all up in your chest, and fall asleep. You might get 3 breaths in, but hey, there was at least one.
It's
Still
better
than none.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing, which is what we love, is that this is about so much more than just those pelvic floor muscles, right? Yeah. Our body is a community, and one thing affects the other more than I think we ever get deep enough into talking about on a regular basis, right? So you're talking about how breathing can affect your pelvic floor, how standing can affect your pelvic floor, right? How your posture is. So it's always so important to look at it from a more dynamic space than just, planks and abs, right? Yeah. It's about so much more than just doing those 50 crunches a day to get those results, right? It's so much deeper and more complex than that. But yet I don't think people need to get intimidated by the complexity, because it is just little simple things that done on a consistent basis, right? We're big on small changes daily, like small consistent changes over time make that big shift. And this is one of those things as well. As women, we don't like to take the big moments, the hour long for ourselves, which we're big on. We try and push people to have that hour for themselves a day as much as they can. Absolutely. So to have it from such a functional space of understanding that there's little things that you can do, right? It's not this big overwhelming process, and that one, you are so worthy of not peeing yourself every time you want to break out and do a dance party. That's a big one.
Dance parties are important.
They're so important.
They bring us joy.
They bring us so much joy, right?
The world needs more dance. I think we'd be in a better place.
Oh, I think so too. Absolutely. And just know that, like, being able to say yes to more, whether you're coming in a space of chronic pain, like that's my backstory, is constantly saying no to things. But also there's a lot of women out there who run their life and their schedule around where that next bathroom is.
Yeah.
I know women who go out into public and have to know, they know when we're in a certain store, they know where the bathroom is. They do. So that's running their life, right? So
it controls you. So that's where the empowerment of like just having these like awareness or like, oh my gosh, I felt that deep muscle. And you might not feel it right away. So it can be frustrating where you're like, she's telling me to take a deep breath in and like do this and I feel nothing. And some people will have that kinesthetic awareness and some people don't. But when you figure it out or when things start to shift, having that control, yeah, that's a huge point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, if you could leave our listeners with one thing, what would you leave our listeners with?
Well, so here's the thing. I want to just come back to this because you did touch on it, but talking about like pelvic floor and on and on and on. So we tend to talk about turning core on. So one thing we need to know about core is that part of it is you can like over turn on. So when I was talking about flare the butt cheeks, so your pelvic floor is like a hammock. So we're always like, oh yeah, hammock. But so the front of it is your pelvic floor, your P muscles, holding your P muscles, and the back is like holding your fart muscles. So that's the butt flare we covered already. The front, we went through this like Kegel, but you don't want to be on all the time because on is like literally like if I gave you a 30-pound weight and was like, here, can you carry this around all day? It would sag. Like you wouldn't be able to maintain that like 90 degrees and your arm, because and then you're like, hey, pull it up, and you kind of try and pull it up. So your arm would look toned. So that pelvic floor will have like tone, but it's not functional when you're Kegling and Kegling and Kegling. So really important to be able to let it go as well. So being able to turn it on, but don't get so obsessed over like, I need to get stronger. Sometimes you just need to like be able to let it go as well. So there's that on and off. As far as what I'd leave you with, like I said, the standing postures are everything because I can give you all the greatest exercises, but if you're doing, it's the little things you do, but you do them a lot, like breathing or standing and standing in certain ways. So standing on the one hip and locking the knees are two really, really big ones that will make a difference. And then the breathing, because that's an easy one. That's an easy one that we all do. We're all breathing. Find your spots in your day. Find a little reminder, if it's like every time you brush your teeth, then take your deep breaths in, just before you brush your teeth. Or when you lie down in your bed, like, okay, I'm going to take 5 deep breaths, or I sit at my desk and take 5 deep breaths. Finding those spots in your day, because then it becomes a habit, and that consistency you talked about is way more important than you having a 30-minute ab routine every day. That's great. If you get to that point, that's fantastic. But that's where I come from, is like, let's make this manageable. I don't know a lot of moms that have that much time. And if you have your hour to yourself, do you really want to spend it all, on one spot?
No.
Like
I want to have a dance party.
Yeah. Have a hot tea undisturbed where I'm sitting quietly.
Right. So you need to have your other moments, and your pelvic floor shouldn't be running you, or the lack of pelvic floor control shouldn't be running you, or your back pain shouldn't be running you. And women need to hear there is hope. There is someone. You need to find someone that will listen to you, and they'll be like, yeah, like, let's figure this out. And I often see the people that they're like, oh, I've already seen like 5 other people, and I'm so thankful that somehow they got to me and they didn't stop at 5. They were like, fine, we'll give you a shot and like hear what you have to say, because there's some really simple things to do that will change everything for the better.
Ugh, so good.
So good.
Thank you so much, Dawn, for being on. And will you let everybody know where they can find you?
Absolutely. So my company is Simply Core Fit. So on Facebook and Instagram, even on YouTube, there's some videos on there. There's a free workout, like a 8-minute. It explains the core, the outer core, the inner core. You can go and try that out with me if you decide like, hey, yeah, I'll do some videos. You know, for 1 month, you can do a subscription for $35. Join me on the Simply Core Strong platform. So I film all over Kelowna. So we go into vineyards, and it's just me and my camera and my yoga mat, taking deep breaths in, finding the pelvic floor, doing some exercises, and they go right from beginner right up. So it's really cool to like start, and you go on this little like virtual tour. So you're lakeside one day and then you're over here in this vineyard or whatever, which is kind of fun, so that they switch up. It'll take you on a little tour. There's some 5-minute videos in there. So if you're like, I can't do a 20-minute, then there's one that's like, if you do nothing else today, do these 3 moves. So fine, stick with that. So if I can give you any, hope and any little nuggets of like, oh, wow, like I found that. Because then when you go and paddleboard or go play with your kids or go for your run, that's what you really want to be doing, isn't it? Like, I don't know that many people that are like, yay, let's lie on the floor and find my core for the rest of my life. The whole point is to find your core, get it functioning for you, and then go out and live. Go out and do the stuff you'd love to do without pain and without feeling like it's controlling you or you need to know where the next bathroom is.
Yes, that's right. Just because it's normal or common
Just
doesn't
'cause it's
make
common
it
doesn't
normal.
make it normal. Yes,
right? And we are
yes.
so worthy of having days where we're not concerned if we're going to pee ourselves. So take the time, ladies, for yourself.
For your own
Take the
good.
self-care. Always be proactive in your self-care. And this should be one of them.
Yeah. So visit me on Simply Core Fit though, because there's some little, like I always do, just a little picture or just, hey, think of this today. Change this. Tilt your head this way instead of that. And we're using the right muscles. Like those are key, right? And I think that's enough. You don't need to be told you need more. I'm all about less. Less is more.
Yeah.
Less is more.
Less is more.
I think so too.
All right.
Right? Relax my butt on it.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. If you got value from this episode, please share. And as always, don't forget to put yourself first. You can't pour from an empty cup.
That's right. Self-care is selfless. We are so grateful to have had you here. I hope everyone goes and finds you. I'm going to go find you so I learn to relax my butt and have longer dance parties. I'm so excited to grow this new part of my health. Very excited. Thank you so much for being here. And as always, thank you to Kevin and Alan at the Next Level University and Podcast Solutions. Yes, we could not do this without you. Love you so much. And we will see you guys next time. Bye.